is a dynamic person. Her given name is Lily Branch Kennedy, but most folks know her as Mrs. K. I met Mrs. K, I believe, maybe about 4 years ago, because as a Rasta, my position is Rasta not dealing with them politics stuff. And she opened my eyes to the other side, so to speak, getting involved in the General Assembly, getting involved in trying to get bills passed into laws, because that's basically what the Virginia People's Assembly is all about. Right. Don't just leave it up to them, because it's obvious that they're not really representing you.
That's right.
And I'm going to bring Mrs. Lily Branch Kennedy, Ms. K. She is the Executive Director of Resource Information Help for the Disadvantaged Incorporated. The initials RIHD, you may have heard of that before. And she is a very, very instrumental part in getting prison reform legislation to the big house.
All right.
I don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm not good at holding this. Okay. All right. There's a 3-minute rule. And for those who know me, I have to write it and go by a speech, because otherwise I'll be here till dawn. Okay, I'm going to start off today. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Martin Luther King, Jr. Born in Atlanta, Georgia, Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. graduated from Morehouse College, BA 1948, and Carter Theology Seminary with a BD 1951, and Boston University with his PhD in 1955. The son of the pastor of the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. King was ordained in 1947 and in 1954 became a minister of a Baptist church in Montgomery, Alabama. He led the black boycott in 1955 to 1956 of segregated city bus lines, and in 1956 gained a majority victory and prestige as a civil rights leader when Montgomery buses began to operate on a desegregation basis. King organized the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which gave him a base to pursue further civil rights actions, first in the South and then later nationwide. His philosophy of nonviolent resistance led to his arrest on numerous occasions in the 1950s and 60s. His campaigns had mixed success, but the protest he led in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963 brought him worldwide attention. He spearheaded the August 1996 March on Washington, which brought together more than 200,000 people. In 1964, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. King's leadership in the civil rights movement was challenged in the mid-60s as others grew more militant. His interest, however, widened from civil rights to include criticism of the Vietnam era and a deep concern over poverty. His plans for a poor people's march to Washington were interrupted in 1967 for a trip to Memphis, Tennessee, in support of the striking sanitation workers. On April 4, 1968, he was shot and killed as he stood on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel. Today, Saturday, January 15th, we honor Dr. King's birthday. It is a national holiday celebrated annually the third Monday. I, Lily Branch Kennedy, founder and executive director of Resource Information Help for the Disadvantaged, Inc., stand here today reminded of the words spoken by Dr. King back in 1967. Dr. King, in an address in opposition of the Vietnam conflict, said, "I could be no silent in the face of such cruel manipulation of the poor." This is how and why I stand here today on Dr. King's birthday in the spirit of his advocacy, his activism, his patriotism, and the love for his fellow man. Here to be the voice of many thousand Virginia prisoners whom through whom though they are locked inside a prison, yet seek not to let prison become locked inside their souls. Incarcerated person whom desire the tools necessary towards being a productive citizen upon re-entry into society and our community. Unfortunately, Virginia criminal justice system has other plans for the thousands of Virginia prisoners. Warehouse, warehouse, warehouse.
That's right.
For decades now, America has been pursuing a deeply punitive anti-crime social policy like no other country in the world. We incarcerate over 2 million people annually in the United States of America. Of that number, an estimated 39,000 are incarcerated in Virginia state facilities on a daily basis. The rise of mass incarceration population is largely of blacks with an increasing Latino population. Mass incarceration continues to have disproportionate effects on African American communities, especially those that are low income and the poor. In accordance to statistical data, Black Americans are incarcerated at a depressing rate of 1 in 15, whereas the stats for other Americans is 1 in 100, with 1 in 31 for Americans who are under some form of criminal justice supervision or probation or parole. For Black men, the ages of 20 to 35, hear this, the rate is 1 in 9 in jail or prison. We should be outraged and ask who, what, when, where, how did this happen? You only need to look at our state laws for answers. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Take your time.
Okay. I got a little cold going on here too. I'm trying my best. Okay. In 1994, at the very same time that crime and the severity of crime was decreasing, our state legislators voted to and former Governor George Allen signed into law the abolition of parole for all prisoners, both violent and nonviolent offenses, sentenced or incarcerated on or after January 1st, 1995. For over a decade, incarceration in Virginia continues to go to the extreme. Sadly, not due to increases or the severity of the crime, however, driven by social policy initiatives like tough on crime, war on drugs, imposing mandatory minimum sentencing, truth in sentencing guidelines, crack versus powder cocaine sentence enhancement, juveniles tried as adults, 3 strikes, along with the greater availability of the death penalty. 15 plus years later, Virginia prison population has grown from an estimated 8,000 to 39,000 daily. Increase in prison time with good time meant a prisoner has to serve 85% of their sentence. Prior to 1995, prisoners with parole eligibility would only serve a third of their sentence and be released upon good time behavior and with no rehabilitation required. Both the parole and the 85% sentencing structure has done little to empower successful reentry into our communities, regardless how badly that the prisoner wants to return back to the community and wants to receive the rehabilitation. The laws currently forbid the Department of Correction to provide the necessary tools. When speaking with incarcerated persons, they continue to refer to themselves as warehouse and forgotten livestock for the prison industrial complex. It is and should be evident that we need to change. Revise the laws to reflect the truth in crime and restoration. It is more evident that the laws must be fair and smart on crime. We need to deter youth violence. To deter youth violence, to allow and afford incarcerated persons the opportunity to earn, not give them, but earn sentence credit in